Right, hello Year 9, and welcome to the last lesson of week 10. So this is lesson number 5. Remember, we have moved on to photosynthesis. Next week we're going to be looking more at the required practical in photosynthesis, but today we're going to be finishing off what we need to know about photosynthesis, and we're going to be mainly focusing on the rate of photosynthesis. So today's lesson is going to be on the rate of photosynthesis. Now remember, whenever you see anything about rate, it's to do with time. So the rate of something happening is how long it's taking to do a certain amount. Now in the first chemistry chapters, you had to do the rate of reaction, different rates of reaction, and you had the units as grams per second, so it's grams used or given off per second, and also volume, centimeters cubed, taken in or given off per second. So they're both to do with time, so it's how quickly a reaction is going, and photosynthesis is a reaction. Very important thing to remember. Okay, so I've got 5 statements here, and there is something wrong with all of them. So can you read the statement and think about what is wrong with that statement? You do not need to write anything down, but if you just have a think about what the answer is. So if you pause the video and do that now, please. Okay, so let's have a look at these statements and let's think about what can be wrong with it. So it says, number 1, light is attracted to plants. So why is that wrong? Because light travels in straight lines, so it doesn't get attracted to something, it doesn't move towards something, it's just going in a straight line. And what we would say is that light is absorbed by plants, not that it's attracted to plants. Number 2, plants take in all substances they need to grow through their roots. The amount of times you hear about feeding the plants, I'm going to give the whatever some plant food. No, it doesn't work like that. So chloroplasts, that's where the light is being absorbed, and that's where it's making food. It's making that glucose. So that's coming from obviously the sun. We've got carbon dioxide that is coming from the air, so that's not from the roots. It's only water and minerals that are taken in through the roots. So everything else comes from other places. Leaves take in water. Why is that wrong? Well, obviously, because it's taken in the roots and then it's transported by the xylem to the leaves. Number 4, sunlight helps plants grow by keeping them warm. How's that wrong? Because chloroplasts absorb the light and use the light's energy for photosynthesis to make glucose. So that's what it's using the sun for. It's using the light to create glucose, to make glucose, not for warmth. Number 5, plants obtain their energy directly from the sun. Energy from the sun allows the plant to carry out photosynthesis, which makes glucose, but actually plants, just like us, will respire, and it's respiration that gives them the energy. So plants photosynthesize to make the food, the glucose. Respiration is where they get their energy from. Okay, so we're looking at the rate of photosynthesis, and we're going to be looking at things called limiting factors. So we need to know the limiting factors of photosynthesis, which are temperature, carbon dioxide concentration, light intensity, and the amount of chlorophyll. For 5 to 6, we need to be able to describe why they have an effect on photosynthesis. And 7 to 8, we need to apply knowledge of enzymes to explain why things like temperature affects the rate of photosynthesis. So this will be new information to you, so you shouldn't have covered this at key stage 3. So when a process demands on 2 or more factors, that made no sense at all. Let me start again. When a process depends on 2 or more factors, the rate of that process is limited by the factor which is in shortest supply. So if you imagine you had a cake business, and the main ingredients, I don't know why I've gone for cake because I don't make cakes, so I don't know what the main ingredients are. I'm guessing it is going to be butter, sugar, flour, and eggs. Let's go for those four things. You might have tons and tons of flour, tons and tons of butter, tons and tons of sugar, but only one egg. You can only produce a certain number of cakes with one egg. So you're limited by the number of eggs. You can't make hundreds and hundreds of cakes because you've only got one egg, so you're limited by it. I don't know if that has helped you picture it. I hope so. So what do we think could be a limiting factor for the rate of photosynthesis? What is going to limit how much photosynthesis can happen? So pause the video and see if you can think of anything that is going to be a limiting factor of photosynthesis. So pause the video now and have a go at that. Okay, so there's actually 5 that we need to know. And these are called the limiting factors of photosynthesis. Light intensity. And can we use light intensity instead of the amount of light? Now, we as science teachers and scientists hate the word amount. I do realise, though, that in a couple of bullet points, there is going to be the word amount. And that's because it's simpler to put that than the unit. So, light intensity. The availability of water. No water, no photosynthesis. Availability of carbon dioxide. Now, a better way of putting that actually would be concentration of carbon dioxide. Availability of chlorophyll, the amount of chlorophyll. That's the one where if you put the amount of chlorophyll, you'll still get the mark. You just put the amount of light, you will not get the mark. And temperature. So can you pop those 5 down? Or if you've got some of them, just add the ones that you didn't get to your notes, please. Okay. Now we can obviously display these as graphs, and we need to know the graphs for 3 of the limiting factors. Now light is the most obvious limiting factor because we always associate photosynthesis with light. That's always drummed into you from primary school. If there's plenty of light, then lots of photosynthesis can take place, surely. If there is little or no light, then photosynthesis will stop. If you put a plant in a dark cupboard for months, it will die. And for most plants, the brighter the light, the faster the rate of photosynthesis. That seems logical. Now, out of these 4 graphs, which one do you think actually shows how light intensity affects the rate of photosynthesis? Now, the rate of photosynthesis here is measured, is looking at those numbers of bubbles that we spoke about in last lesson. So the more bubbles, the more photosynthesis is happening. So which one of these graphs do you think shows how light intensity affects the rate of photosynthesis? It's actually this one. Now, can you, before I go into the details of it, copy this graph into your book? Just need the y and the x-axis, label them. You can label the y-axis, you'll probably see it more often just as the rate of photosynthesis. So you can use rate of photosynthesis. And then we need to get that line drawn correctly. It starts later on, it goes up, and then it plateaus. So pause the video now if you need a bit more time to copy that down. Okay, so for the next bit, I'm going to talk about the different parts of the graph, and then you at the end can add it to your graph. So don't just copy it as I'm going through, listen to what I'm saying, look at the graph, and then add your notes. So first of all, any oxygen produced in photosynthesis is actually used by respiration. So we respire, we use oxygen, but plants also do that. So any initial oxygen that is produced will actually just be used by the plants for photosynthesis because they're respiring all day. That's why you can't have plants at night in a hospital. In fact, actually, I don't think you allow plants at all anymore. But it used to be that at night time the plants were taken out. And that's because they're not photosynthesizing, they're just respiring. So they actually produce carbon dioxide only. So at this point of the graph, we've got increasing light intensity, increasing the rate of photosynthesis. So the line is going up, it's positive correlation. At this point, we've got it plateauing. And that's because increasing the light intensity starts to not have an effect on the rate of photosynthesis because it's limited by everything else. And the other things that we need to know are carbon dioxide, water, and chlorophyll. So it's limited by one of those other things. So can you now pause this video and can you add notes? You don't have to copy what I have got on this slide. You can obviously use your own words to describe each point. So pause the video and do that now, please. Okay. Oh, sorry, forgot to add compensation point. That's how much that's taking into account that the oxygen is used for respiration at the beginning. So the compensation point is where its overall net amount of oxygen is positive. Don't worry too much about that, though I haven't seen the exam and it's not on the specification. Okay, so now we're going to look at temperature. Now, temperature affects all chemical reactions. So when we did the chemistry topics, you will have done the effects of temperature and you would know that the higher the temperature, the faster the reaction. And that's because those particles have more energy, they're moving faster, so therefore they're more likely to collide, the collision theory. But this isn't the case in photosynthesis, because in photosynthesis we use something called an enzyme. And enzymes are biological catalysts. So we've done about enzymes before together, so hopefully we can link the two together. So enzymes are biological catalysts that speed up the rate of a reaction, but if they get too hot, that active site changes shape. It means they can't work anymore. So what we end up is a graph that looks like this. So it goes up really, really quickly. We've got a positive correlation to begin with. Then it reaches the top. What do we call that top bit? The optimum temperature. Well done if you remember that. And then it very, very quickly lowers, descends until it gets to 0. So can you copy that graph, please? Because we need to know the shape of how temperature affects the rate of photosynthesis. And then can we put onto that graph about why there is a sudden drop-off after the optimum temperature? And that's because, as I've just put up on the last paragraph, that the enzymes are denatured. So they are unable to carry out the reaction. So if you could pause the video now and get that down, please. Okay, so next one is looking at carbon dioxide. And this is the graph we need to know for carbon dioxide. And you might notice that it looks very similar to the first one we did, which was about how light is a limiting factor. Now, the more carbon dioxide a plant has, the more photosynthesis it can do. So it increases, it goes up, that positive correlation. But you can see that as it continues to increase, it starts to plateau. Why is it plateauing? Because it's limited by the other factors. What are the other factors? I'm glad you asked. Light intensity, amount of chlorophyll, water availability, and temperature. Any one of those would be a limiting factor. So can you make sure you've got that graph down, please, with a description of what is happening in there. Okay, so let's see how much we understand of what is going on. So the graph on the right-hand side shows the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere in the northern hemisphere and how it changes throughout the year. So you can see in January, there's high levels of carbon dioxide, then it goes down to July, and then it goes back up to December, and obviously repeats. So there's a couple of couple of questions on here. The northern hemisphere, if you are not a geographer, is where we are. It's on the top bit of the globe, I suppose. Be a good way of doing it, where has seasons like England does. So we've got two questions. Describe the changes seen on the graph, and B, suggest a reason for the changes seen in the graph. And remember, if it's asking you, saying suggest, it doesn't expect you to know, just make a logical, thought out reason why. So can you pause the video? You don't have to write the answers to this one, but can you come up with an answer for A and B, please? Okay, so describe the changes. So decrease, it starts high in January, decreases to its lowest at July, and then increases to December. I do realise I said that at the beginning anyway, so well done if you've got that. What I didn't speak about though is suggest a reason for the changes. So why is it that there's less carbon dioxide in the atmosphere in July compared to in December and January? And very well done if you thought that it's because the trees and plants are working in the summer and then they're dormant, or you can say the leaves drop, or they're not photosynthesizing in winter. So they're not taking that carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere. Very well done if you got that. Don't panic if you didn't. If you can see that now, then that's great. Okay, so our penultimate one, the last one we're going to be looking at, is chlorophyll levels. And the amount of chlorophyll in a leaf is limited depending on how much space there is. If the amount of chlorophyll in the leaf is limited anyway, such as disease, anything like that, less photosynthesis will take place. If a plant does not have enough minerals, such as magnesium, it cannot make chlorophyll. So this is why it's important to, they say feed, but we know it's not feeding, but adding stuff, I'm trying to think of a better word, but I say it's plant food at home as well, where they add the stuff to the water and give it to the plants or put it in the soil. It contains minerals like magnesium that plants need to help them make chlorophyll. So if they don't have that, they can't make the chlorophyll, they can't photosynthesize, and will end up dying. So can we pause the video and just summarize what we've just said in one sentence? Why is chlorophyll a limiting factor in photosynthesis? Okay, so the last thing is this question, and then we're done. So very well done. Explain, in terms of limiting factors, why the plants growing in a tropical rainforest are so much bigger than the plants that grow in a UK woodland, and why both are bigger than the plants in the Arctic tundra. So the right-hand side is the Arctic tundra. It looks like a desert, but it's actually the Arctic tundra. In the middle is a UK woodland, and on the right-hand side we've got a tropical rainforest. So explain, so saying why, and refer to limiting factors. Why are plants bigger in the rainforest? It's going to be worth 3 marks. I spend no more than 4 minutes on this. So pause the video, have a go at that question. Okay, so hopefully we've had a go at that question now. And here are some things you might have spoken about. So you might have said that in a tropical rainforest, it's very hot. There's a lot of light, so it's got high temperature, high light intensity. There's lots of moisture because it's very humid. It's raining a lot, that's why it's called the rainforest. There'll be a lot of decaying material which produces carbon dioxide. Now, I wouldn't expect you to get that. So if you did, really well done. If you said that in the UK we have shorter days, we have seasons, they don't have that in the rainforest. It is hot and humid all year round. Whereas here, we obviously in winter it's cold, in the summer it's hot and sunny. So if you've spoken about any of those, brilliant. Arctic tundra, there's actually no light there at all during the winter. So it's dark all the time. And then in summer, obviously, the days start getting longer again. You've also got things like frozen ground, so plants can't grow. This is very cold. Temperature, obviously, a limiting factor as well. So have a read through that, see if you've got any of those. I imagine that you have. So that's really good. But because it's asking you to explain, you've got to mention the limiting factor. So it's either light intensity, temperature, carbon dioxide, amount of carbon dioxide, bad, not amount of carbon dioxide, concentration of carbon dioxide, or the amount of chlorophyll. It's got to be referring to one of those, and it's got to say why that would have an effect. Okay, so very well done. Well done for completing the week. Mr. Pope is putting on the Doddle work now and assessing those. So look out for that Doddle work that is going to be relevant to this. Take care of yourselves. Have a lovely weekend. And I will see you in week 11. Thank you very much and goodbye.